You're listening to Microbin Radio, progressively elevating the conversation. Coming up next, personalities and profiles. Here's your host, Michael S. Robinson.
Top of the hour to you. Welcome to Personalities and Profiles here on Microbin Radio. We're streaming live from our studios here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And thanks to our team, we're live on Facebook. So welcome to all of our Facebook fans. It's a pleasure to have your company with us today. I'm Michael Robinson, your host, also hosting the Michael S. Robinson Show every Saturday at 2 p.m. on AM 970 The Answer, one of New York City's leading talk radio stations. I invite you to tune in and listen to our conversation. Great, inspiring stuff. I'm also president and CEO of Microbin Incorporated, a parent company of Microbin Radio, and author of the book, 100 Pennies. Microbin Radio is an internet talk radio station designed to elevate talk radio conversation progressively with content-driven narratives. And there's an app for that, so download our app from the App Store or Google Play. I welcome you to join the conversation on Twitter and Facebook at Microbin Radio. Here on Microbin Radio, we have a weekly show, Personalities and Profiles, which highlights featured guests who are making a difference in our communities across the country. And my guest today is, I'm actually honored to have him with us, the second commissioner from the 2nd District of Fort Lauderdale. His name is Dean Trantalis. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
It's a pleasure having you. Actually, I'm so thrilled because this is something that I want to do on a regular basis. I'm new to Fort Lauderdale. I moved about maybe 8 months ago, and we have offices here. We have offices in New York, and I want to be able to profile people like you who have a very interesting story. And tell me, I know you're an attorney, and I know certainly you're a politician. What made you decide to become an attorney and then eventually a politician?
Well, first of all, let me thank you and welcome you to Fort Lauderdale. We have a very welcoming, embracing, diverse community, and knowing that your radio station is broadcasting from our location makes me feel good that you've recognized us as we recognize your audience as being the most it's wonderful to know that people in your listening audience are able to understand that Fort Lauderdale is a place where it's welcoming, embracing diversity, and I hope we can talk about that today.
Absolutely. I think that's something I want to definitely talk about, because the reality is that a lot of people are not aware of how diverse Fort Lauderdale is, right? I'm from New York originally. I've lived there for over 32 years.
But you're only 31.
Exactly. I mean, how is that possible, right? Yes. So a lot of people up north think about the South as being conservative, think about us as being very, very, Tea Party-ish. So we're going to talk about how pocketed Florida is. You know, you think about Fort Lauderdale, you think about Miami, you think about Orlando and how progressive they are in terms of their ideology when it comes to moral issues and social issues. So we'll talk about that later. But I want to know about you, because you are an attorney.
I thought I avoided this.
I know, and I'm getting back to it.
Well, I became an attorney right after college, and I went to law school here down in Florida, and it was actually the first time I ever been to Florida by going to law school. So it was my hope that I was going to reach away from the Northeast, because if you're from the Northeast, you tend to live in a certain bubble and a certain mentality, and unless you're going to become more intellectually advanced, you kind of have to visit the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So visiting Florida and going to school in Florida became important to me, and I've been in Florida and I've been a member of the bar since 1980. So it's been a great experience, and I've spent most of my time in Fort Lauderdale, and in the early years had a very private life when I moved here, and then as time came on, Fort Lauderdale became part of the activist scene, trying to change laws, change minds, and hopefully make changes for the future. And in the early 90s, I became involved in the activist movement and have been that way ever since. And wasn't until the early 2000s that I decided it was time for someone from our community, from the LGBT community, to seek higher office. An opportunity came up in the year 2002. It was an open seat on the City Commission of Fort Lauderdale. Attempts had been made in the past by members of my community, unsuccessfully, unfortunately. But I thought, well, let me give it a shot, and I won, and it was great, and it's been that way ever since. We have a great community here, and but you had mentioned, we're a southern state, and people up north look at Florida like it's a pocket of Tea Partyists. Fort Lauderdale is Florida is a very complex state, and it has, I don't want to say divisions, I'm just going to say it represents many different ideologies and points of view, and often conflicted, but certainly engaging. And Fort Lauderdale is one of those places, Broward County in particular, is a place that I feel that represents many, many different ideologies and backgrounds. You talk to the people in the school board, over 50 to 60 native languages are spoken in our public schools, and we have a thriving business community in addition to the tourism and so forth. So, we do have a lot of progressive-minded people here, and I think that we stand out amongst the rest of the counties in the state as being the most progressive in the state.
Now, I know you got an award for diversity from the Milk Foundation
Harvey Milk Foundation, yes.
Couple of years ago.
Yes.
And of course, that was a tragedy when that happened. That assassination happened. How is it today for a gay politician or somebody who's looking to go into politics compared to back then? How is it in terms of how people are received in the community, mainstream community, as a gay politician?
Certainly back in the late 70s, Harvey Milk was definitely definitely somebody who broke new ground. He was a pioneer, certainly a warrior in this war against discrimination and bigotry. Unfortunately, he was a martyr in the effort, and we don't have him today to lead us and to inspire us like he did to many in the 70s. But we have others who are his progeny. His nephew is in Wilton Manors, who travels around the world, but Mr. Milk is certainly taken up the standard and has been an important component in the fight for activism and equality. Mm-hmm. But and we here in South Florida also have our own history. Many people remember Anita Bryant and her crusade against the LGBT community back in the late 70s, which was contemporaneous with Harvey Milk. And back in the late 70s, Miami-Dade County had passed an ordinance that added sexual orientation as a protected class against discrimination in housing, public accommodations, and in the workforce. And she made the effort to overturn that ordinance, and it was summarily overturned by the population back then. Fast forward, comes Broward County in 1995. We did pass the ordinance. The county commission passed the ordinance, and it has stuck ever since. And I'm very proud to have said I've been a part of that effort, and many others, most of whom are not alive today, but certainly they were the great mentors as I was just beginning in the activist movement.
Why Fort Lauderdale versus somewhere else? What made it so special here?
Well, I think that the influx of Northeasterners definitely added to the progressive mix of the points of view that represent Broward County. People from the Northeast, New York, like yourself, New York, New Jersey, the metropolitan areas of the Midwest. We definitely have a large representation of people who are more fair-minded and not bigoted and discriminatory. So there's no doubt that the migration of people from the north to the south has influenced points of view, because clearly the past of Fort Lauderdale was not terribly stellar when it came to rights of people and discrimination. I'm a real estate attorney, and I remember in the early days I used to hand examine titles to property when we did real estate closings, and we would see how deeds specifically said, no Jews, no blacks, no Indians. Gays weren't even on the radar back then. And when you have it written in the document, you knew that there was entrenched discrimination in this community. But we've changed that. It's completely 180. It's we have the Fort Lauderdale area, which includes Fort Lauderdale, Oakland Park, Wilton Manors, has the highest concentration of same-sex households in the entire country. It's no longer the storied areas of Manhattan or San Francisco. This is ground zero for the LGBT community in the United States, and I'm very proud to be a part of it.
Congratulations on being a progressive thought leader where that's concerned, because I think it's important for us, whether we think about same-sex marriage as being the right of people or not. I think it's important for us as a community, as a world, to recognize the fact that everyone cannot be the same, and diversity brings strength, whether you're black, white, Jew, Gentile, straight, gay. So I really welcome that mindset of people who think that way and are willing to do something about it. Let's talk a little bit about the demographics and the community and the economy, because that's important for somebody like me as a business person and as a progressive-minded person, I would like to think I am. We are basically a tourist-driven community. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Tourism has been a part of what has generated a lot of the income in terms of the gross, domestic product for the area. We've had a lot of situations recently with tourism being affected because of terrorists. We've had recently the London attacks. We've had the Manchester attacks in England. We've had the Orlando attacks in Orlando, Florida, and recently Fort Lauderdale Airport. What are we doing as a community to protect our citizens against terrorists? And also, what are we doing to encourage tourists to come here, knowing that it is a safe place to be?
Well, I kudos to our law enforcement community, the Broward County Sheriff's Department, for example, highly trained, best leadership, constantly re-examining and understanding the motives for terrorism, the techniques of terrorism, and how to suppress it. Yes, we did have an unfortunate incident at the airport, but it was handled remarkably well, and I think it was a great testament to the talent that they have. But also in the city of Fort Lauderdale, we have also great talent. We have our leadership, our training, everything about it has just been stellar, and they work together hand in hand in ensuring that we have a very safe and welcoming environment. You have to understand that the tourism industry is important. We have one of the busiest ports in the entire world for cruise ship travel, and the only reason why people feel comfortable coming here and taking their tours from Fort Lauderdale is because they know this is a safe environment, and we want to keep it that way. We have the talent, we devote the resources, and I think that the world needs to recognize how important that is.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny, we were at the movie theater about 4 days ago. In the middle of the movie, the entire thing shut down, alarms went off, and everyone went scattering everywhere. Wow. Because I think people are unnerved. Terrorism is no longer a situation where you have someone coming from the Middle East to come here and do us harm. They're locally grown people who are American citizens, who are oftentimes...
Sometimes our worst fear is the people that live here, because it isn't a particular ethnic group or religious group. America is more threatened by people who were born here, who are so-called traditional Americans, who are anti-government, who are anti-establishment. And it'd be so much nicer if people just learn how to get along with one another.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back with more. I'm talking today with Commissioner of Fort Lauderdale 2nd District, Dean Trantalis. We'll be right back here on Microbin Radio. I'm Michael Robinson. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Personalities and Profiles here on Microbin Radio, progressively elevating the conversation. Tune in at 2 p.m. for Andy Talks Real Estate, live here on Microbin Radio, sponsored by Microbin Incorporated. Don't forget to catch the Michael S. Robinson Show on New York's leading talk radio station, AM 970 The Answer, every Saturday at 2 p.m., also streaming live here on Microbin Radio. Simply download our app from the App Store or Google Play. Now back to the show.
Hi there, I'm Michael Robinson, hosting Personalities and Profiles here on Microbin Radio. My guest is Commissioner Dean Trantalis. He represents Fort Lauderdale's 2nd District. Don't forget to catch my show every Saturday on New York's leading talk radio station, AM 970 The Answer. That's the Michael S. Robinson Show at 2 p.m. this Saturday on AM 970 The Answer. So, sir, you are wonderful. I love the fact that you talk about progressive ideas. I love the fact that you're doing something in our world to make it better. You know, I think a lot of politicians are shysters or, dishonest or whatever. So it's really nice when somebody really takes it out of their own goodwill to want to do something to better their community.
I think most people who are in public service do it for the good of the community, and I would say that most people in public office sacrifice a lot in their personal and business life in order to give back to the
Absolutely.
community and
Absolutely.
at large. And I think that, but let me just say that it's so important for members of marginalized groups to take part in the political process and to hold public office, because unless you truly have a seat at the table, your voice is never really heard. And yet you can say, well, I have friends in public office and I have alliances, allegiances, and sympathies. But until you have a vote at the dais, your voice is really never really, it's not taken as seriously as because you're just one of many interest groups at that point if you're not at the table.
Right.
So those who are listening, and so those who have thought about running for public office, it's not an easy task. Running for office is certainly a great experience, win or lose, but I think that it's important to recognize the responsibility of being in public office, the amount of work that's involved, but also knowing that the reward is so great that you're fulfilling the need and the goals of your own constituency that look up to you and hope that you serve them in the very best way you can.
Absolutely. I think if that's the attitude a person takes, it certainly is the right attitude, because at the end of the day, you're serving the public's best interest, right? And the public need to feel that you are looking out for their best interest. And I've just seen so many situations in my life behind the scenes on how politics work, and it's sometimes a little bit disconcerting. So when I see somebody who is basically doing it for the betterment of a community, it makes me feel good, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. What are the greatest challenges you have as a leader here in Fort Lauderdale?
I would say that there are many different challenges. Certainly, again, when you talk about the time commitment to being in public service, it takes a tremendous amount of your time away from your personal life, your business life, and so you have to know that up front. It's not just a show up and you really are devoted to many different aspects of your community in ways you never were before, attending events and participating in community forums, and as well as the scheduled meetings as a commissioner. But the other challenges I have are communication, trying to make sure everyone understands what's going on, having all the facts so that they can judge actions based on the full set of facts. Too often people listen to gossip and they don't fully understand everything, and that takes away from the meaningful progress. But the other, and I think the most important thing, is trying to come together on conflicting ideologies that often are presented when it comes to decision making at the commission level. I know that I don't agree with everything my fellow commissioners say, and I know they don't all agree with me. So the goal is to seek compromise and to find middle ground, knowing that each one of us represents a point of view that is equally important. Mm-hmm. We have multiple constituencies and ideologies in Fort Lauderdale, very, very complex city. And and we each bring to the table something important. And I think that when we sit up there, the legislative process is out in the sunshine, as we say here, and so
Even though we had no sunshine for the past 5 days, but
the sun came out today, so it's a beautiful day today.
Right.
And I think that by working together and building consensus is how America really works. And I think it's as long as everyone respects one another, and we may disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable about it.
Absolutely. What is your greatest passion?
Multiple ones. I don't think I have a single passion. Certainly, I think it's important that those who cannot help themselves is very, very important to me. The homeless, those who are finding it difficult to find affordable housing, people who come here looking for a new life. Those are the things that I think that we owe society the most, because those people
are most vulnerable.
Exactly. And I would think that's the most important thing. But sometimes what drives that is economic development. To be able to have the resources to be able to help those who are least able to help themselves, we need to be the economic engine. So Fort Lauderdale, fortunately, is in a time now that many people are looking to invest in our community, developers, especially in real estate.
Right.
While we are tourist-driven and we have a very successful marine industry here, real estate is definitely a huge component of our economic community. And as that improves and people continue to invest in our community, creates jobs in construction and services and so forth. And as they say, rising tide lifts all boats. So more and more people get to share. But as a public official, we have to ensure that everyone shares, that we don't leave people out, that we don't try to push homeless people aside and wish them away instead of helping them and lending them a helping hand. So those would be the most challenging things that I think that I could think of.
Okay. I have been a small business owner for over 25 years, and small business community is huge for me. And oftentimes government can be a bit obstructive when it comes to getting small businesses up and running and functioning because of regulations and taxation and penalties and all of the various red tape or due diligence necessary. What are you doing in Fort Lauderdale to encourage small businesses and small business growth? Because remember, this is the backbone of our economy. Small business sector is like 53% of our gross domestic product. What are we doing here in Fort Lauderdale to encourage small business growth and stimulate the economy from that perspective?
Well, there are certain responsibilities that a city government has, and to that extent, using those powers, we can try to create an environment in which business will thrive. So there are certain key components to that. One of which is, of course, keeping public safety, making sure that the streets are safe to walk on, and that people feel safe and secure in their homes, and that when they go out shopping or when they go to work, they don't fear their lives. Okay, so that's an important thing, knowing you're living in a safe community.
Right.
The second thing is knowing you live in a clean community, making sure you're environmentally safe, so that we have clean streets, clean water, clean air. And that's also a very important municipal component. In addition, when businesses look to locate here, people look to the educational system, making sure we have quality schools and schools at all levels, from preschool all the way to the universities. And I think we certainly have a full complement of all of that here. So those are types of things that help individuals know that they're coming to an area that they can at least feel comfortable in saying, this is where I can move to, I can visit, or I can move and I can thrive, and I can start a career, I can start a family, and I know that I will be able to be a success. Now, there are some other things. For example, like if you're in building, the city has a building department, and we have to issue building permits. So it's incumbent upon us to make that a swift and clean process and not hold people back on that. When it comes to taxation, Fort Lauderdale has no real business tax except just to sign up your business, and it's a very nominal fee. We have no income tax. We have a low sales tax in Florida, and we have no corporate income tax in Florida to any measurable degree. So we have the right environment for people wanting to start a career, start a business, and certainly we have wonderful weather for the most part, and you cannot. Not enough money can buy that. That's an intangible that is very, very encouraging for people to want to move here.
Yeah, so all my small business friends and entrepreneurs, you hear that. No small business taxes, no income taxes, and guess what? No corporate taxes here in Fort Lauderdale or in Florida in general. That's fantastic to know. So tell us about Fort Lauderdale and your relationship with it. Why have you chosen to live here? Why have you chosen to make this home? And why should someone decide to move here?
I moved here kind of as a fluke. I had a roommate from law school who had. I went to law school in St. Petersburg, Florida, and after I'd graduated, I had moved back to Connecticut. Of course, moved in with my parents again, as we all do, and I took the Connecticut bar. I started working.
My mother lived with me until 2 years ago, but
really?
She was living with me, not me living with her.
You're such a good son.
I tried.
And so moving back to Connecticut, working there for a couple of years, and then my friend from law school had moved to the east side, the East Coast, and said, you ought to come here. It's a great place. It's nothing like the West Coast. You'll have more fun. And so I thought I'd come down, check it out. And I started working with him at the beginning. And then I was just sort of coming out as a person and realizing the fact that I was gay. And so when I saw what was around me, this very this well-populated, inviting, embracing environment within the LGBT community, I thought, well, this is like a kid in a candy store. When you're 29 years old, this is a place you want to be. So it was really a place where people do come to have fun, and I was one of those people.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why I came. I mean, certainly the weather is fantastic.
Right.
My house is 3 blocks from the beach, which I absolutely love. And I'm able to run a business. And, one of the reasons why I wanted to start this radio station is to have issues, that matter to a progressive community. And a community does not have to be in Fort Lauderdale. It could be in New York City. In fact, we're broadcasting live all over the world right now. So one of the things that matters to me is sustainability. It matters because I do believe in climate change, despite whatever our president says. Climate change is a fact. And what are we doing here in Fort Lauderdale to encourage a sustainable living, encourage green technology, encourage recycling and things like that? What are we doing here to do that?
Well, most importantly, we need to recognize the need to anticipate climate change, rising sea levels, and things like that. We're kind of behind the 8 ball here in South Florida. We're sort of catching up. My own city, the same way. We have yet to devise policy or implement any programs, let alone find funding. And so that's an important agenda goal that I have in my next term, which will be next March. And those that will come to the commission, the new mayor, we need to work together to make sure that that's a front burner item. As far as environmentally safe conditions, more and more people are catching on to the need for new LEED certified buildings and making sure that our carbon footprint shrinks every year. And I think more and more people are very sensitive to that.
Very good. Very good. Dean Trantalis, it's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much
For being here.
Absolutely.
It's been an honor.
Thank you.
Come back again.
Okay.
And we'll talk about sustainability and what we need to do to make this a better place. All right?
Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us here on Personalities and Profiles here on Microbin Radio. I'm Michael Robinson. Continue to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Microbin Radio. Remember, this is your time. Use it wisely.
This program is sponsored by Microbin Incorporated.